We have a few folks still joining, so we'll get started in just a bit. So we're just asking for name and hub in the chat, please, and we'll get started shortly.
And cat's name, if your cat is making an appearance. Yeah, cute one.
Great. I think we've slowed down with folks joining, but they can just join on in. I think we're going to go ahead and get started since we have a nice full agenda. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Becky.
Oh, thank you, Maria. Hi, everybody. Wonderful to see you all. I want to just do just a little overview of what we're going to spend the first hour or so of our time together on. And I think just wanting, or I know I really wanted to start with just some acknowledgement and appreciation for all of the thoughtful and collaborative spirit that you've all brought to our recent work, especially around the revised Early Learning Hub administrative rules, the development of a new quarterly report, drafting of a new grant agreement. Your insights have truly been invaluable, and we deeply appreciate your continued engagement. So thank you very much. I'm excited as we enter this new grant period together. As far as the purpose of today's session, we want to discuss a new effort that we're in the early stages of initiating, and this work will focus on developing a structured review cycle for early learning hubs, one that helps us determine when hubs are functioning really well, when additional guidance or corrective action might be needed, and when a contract may need to be amended or enter a competitive rebid process. Um, this this is not meant to catch anyone off guard, the process. It's really about wanting to create clear, consistent, and transparent process that builds on the documentation and monitoring already happening throughout the contract period. So our goal is really to support strong performance and ensure that we have the tools to respond appropriately if and when any challenges arise. Um, in addition to that review cycle, we'll also be working on what we're calling a responsive rebid process that will help us to be prepared for situations where a new backbone organization needs to be identified, for example, mid-contract, whether that's due to a governance council decision, a backbone opting out, or other emerging circumstances. So that would also apply to a situation at the end of a contract term if a backbone were to choose not to renew. So that this step and both steps are really building on and aligned with the recommendations that emerged from the recent work that Early Learning Hubs did with the BUILD initiative, which encouraged DELC to document a clear process for regions that may undergo a shift in backbone agency. So this is going to be a rather lengthy process, not something that's going to be implemented overnight, and we're committed to engaging with you early and often as we shape these processes. So today's just the start. Your feedback, your questions, and your lived experience will be essential in making sure that what we build is practical, that it's equitable, and that it's aligned with the needs of your communities. So we're not doing this alone or in a vacuum, and to help guide this work, we've brought in a very skilled facilitator, Heidi East McGowan. Many of you already know Heidi from her extensive work with Early Learning Hubs, and she'll be spending time with you today to perspectives. So we set aside almost an hour on today's agenda for this conversation, and we're really looking forward to hearing from you and just getting started on this next hub journey. So with that, I will turn it over to Heidi.
Thanks, Becky. Okay, first, it's so good to be with so many of you that I've had the honor and joy of working with. It's so fun to be with you here. And for those I haven't yet had the privilege of working with, I look forward to through this process, getting to know you and the important work you're leading. Maybe I should introduce myself actually, now that I think about it. I'm Heidi East McGowan. I'm a consultant, and I have some pretty deep roots of early learning in Oregon. I mean, deep roots in early learning that go back to actually working directly in the field in early childhood as a childcare provider. Then moving into policy and was the director of the Commission for Childcare in the, gosh, I started that in 2004, and then worked with Governor Kitzhaber's office in 2011 that brought about the development of the Early Learning Division at the time and Early Learning Hubs at the time. And I've had the honor of working with Early Learning Hubs ever since that early formation and the development of Early Learning Hubs, including several of you here, or people who were in your roles before you. And so it's an honor for me to get to come into this space with you and partner with you to start thinking about how do we support this process of review and rebid. And so I will be here. Actually, I'll share a couple slides. It's going to be similar to what you've just heard Becky share. And then I hope just to have a dialogue with you to start the conversation today. And let's look at kind of a plan going forward for how you can be partners in this space of design and development. All right, let me share my screen real quick. So really my role during this process is to support the leaders at DELC develop a review and a rebid process for the hub system, and to facilitate engagement, to inform the process. And as Becky said, this is an initial engagement process with you today, and I look forward to much more. And then the result will be that we're aiming for is a documented process that's clear and that outlines what that review and rebid process will look like. As Becky already shared with you, we've been thinking about this in our conversations in this early phase of launch about two processes. One is that review process for all hubs, as Becky said, or an example could be that a hub would engage in a review that includes a backbone review with DELC every 4 years with a monitoring process every 2 years. That's just an example. It's not said. It's just it's just an example. And then a rebid process that's responsive to specific hub scenarios where, as the governance council, the backbone requests a backbone change or DELC identifies a performance issue. Timeline that we're aiming for, hoping for, is to have that rebid process implemented in spring of 2026 with the routine review in July of 2027. So taking a little bit more time on that routine review. And these are the guided questions that we've outlined for you today. And I'll stop screen sharing in a minute, but I just wanted to share them up front, and then we'll dive into them. But we want to really understand from you, who are the people that need to be involved in developing a review and rebid process? If you have experienced a programmatic monitoring in the past, what went well? What suggestions do you have as a new process is developed? I know you all have a lot of wisdom to bring, so I look forward to hearing that. Would you like to designate a couple people or a small work group to work with us, or just to stay in this full group with us in conversation? And what questions or concerns are coming up for you that would be valuable to voice at this phase? All right, so I'm going to stop screen sharing, and let's see. Okay, we're all back here. So maybe before I dive into those questions, what reflections or questions do you have, sort of just based on what you've heard so far? I'll just pause for a second here.
Heidi, hi, this is Lisa Harnish.
Hi, Lisa Harnish. It's very nice to hear
Hi.
you.
Yes, I'm frantically trying to get stuff out of my car so I can get into the office. And I missed the very beginning part I did have a chance to look at the slides, but curiosity that I had after hearing you talk. So the rebid process will be in spring of 26. Is that what I heard, or is it based on sort of individually what is happening in community and the need
Yes.
for?
Great question, Lisa. Thanks for asking that, clarifying. The response of the rebid is process that we're talking about is in response to a local community where maybe the backbone or the governance council has requested a backbone change, or there have been some identified performance issues. So it's more specific to an individual community. And Becky, please correct me if I'm saying anything that I'm misunderstanding or not getting right.
Yeah, that's right. So the kind of differentiating between a review process that will take a longer to develop, that we would be wanting all hubs to be able to participate in, that would not necessarily lead to, and that oftentimes would not lead to any kind of a rebid. And then this rebid process for when we do need to respond to region-specific scenarios where we do have to identify a new backbone, and what's the process that we would be initiating in those circumstances. So that's not to say that any rebids would take place in spring of 2026, just that we hope to have that process solidified and in place at that time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
I have a question, Heidi. I'm Chris Coombs with Lane County. What currently happens if a hub does not have a great relationship with their backbone? What's the current process for that?
I'll need to turn to you, Becky.
So part of what we're responding to right now is that we do not have a fully articulated process laid out in rule or in guidance. And we want to create something that is going to be consistently applied across scenarios, of course, allowing for individual circumstances to be responded to, but to the best of our ability to have that streamlined and consistent process across the more common scenarios that we anticipate could arise.
Thank you.
Thanks, Becky. And Chris, I see your note in chat just to confirm we haven't had a review process in the past. This concept would be new. I want to just do a check-in because I just want to check in with you, Becky, just to confirm.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. Yeah, and I think that we could also turn that question to those of you hub directors who probably have even more historical knowledge than I do about any circumstances that you've seen in the past, because there have been circumstances when a backbone has change has occurred, but we have not had a standardized process, like DELC initiated process, to my knowledge, or like a standardized review that applied to all hubs since hubs were created in statute in 2013.
So would this
Go ahead, Shira.
would this be different than our monitoring site visits that we've done in the past?
I think, Jen, and you're referring to the monitoring visits that occurred, like, I think between 2015 and 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
We've
there were
read a whole
some,
bunch of information and
yeah,
survey
it's yet to be defined. And I think that's part of that work together that we have. And there's probably a lot of lessons to learn from that time period that will inform. And that's where I think the wisdom you hold, especially from that time. And we have a question about it in our question too. So yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Thanks, Jen. Shira, you've got your hand up there.
Hi, nice to see you, Heidi. I was just wondering, like, before developing a review process, do we have a process in place? And I kind of think that the rules maybe are part of it, but do we already have a process that Backbones know what the expectations are of them before we come in and start reviewing them? And I'm sorry, I am feeling under the weather today, so I apologize
Oh.
for my if my voice sounds weird.
Yeah. I think I'll Becky, I'll jump and then you can fill in if I'm missing. I think that's part of the work together is to create what is needed to be defined. There are, of course, as you know, there are early learning hub rules, there are grant agreements, there's statute. And so I think this is part of the work together is what do you think needs to be defined? What is your expertise and wisdom from the years that you've done as a hub director? What do we need? So it's a great question. Thanks for that, Shira. Becky, feel free to add in. Nancy, great.
Yeah, I just wanted to read Rod's comment. Or Rod, did
Thank
you
you.
just want to share a little bit more about that?
Well, I was just curious because in the new grant agreement, there's a lot of language that needs to be in our bylaws now. And so I'm in the process of editing our bylaws, or will be in the next 2 or 3 months here. But and I can't remember the exact language, but in our bylaws now needs to be some type of grievance process between our Hub Governance Council and our Backbone. But if this process is being developed, I fear you develop something that contradicts what is getting developed here, and then that just adds some confusion with our bylaws. If this process is being developed, do we need to have that in our bylaws, is my question.
I think I see the grievance procedure that you all would be looking to do would be looking to mediate before it gets to the point of needing DELC to intervene. And so I do think it's still an important piece that would be included within the bylaws. And then this would be complementary to that. If have you gone through your process would be one of the questions that we would likely ask to determine if this is the next step that is needed.
All right, thanks, Rod. Athena, you've got your hand up there.
Hello. I just have two things. The first is, as we're looking at people to have at the table, I know that our governance council would be really interested in having the chair, co-chair be involved in the processes. I think it's important to include them in these processes. The other thing, as we're looking at a process being developed, is really taking into consideration what the education around that will be before it's rolled out, so that there's a clear understanding of guidelines for both hubs and backbones and all of that, and being really intentional with how that's communicated would be really helpful.
Great. Thank you, Athena, for those 2 points. Appreciate that. And I went ahead and put that question in the chat. Who are the people that need to be involved in developing a responsive rebid process? Let me make sure that's, yeah. And before we jump there, let me look at that. There was a question there too from you, I think, Chris. Yeah. Is the review process for Backbones hubs or both? Oh no, Nancy, Becky, or Maria, if you want to answer that.
I think the review process will include backbones and hubs. I think that will be part of the process.
Right.
Although we haven't, we don't have details on that yet. Becky, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Still early here. Evan, I see your response here, and then Shira, we'll go to you. Evan, your response is, wouldn't it be representatives from the required sectors for our governance, maybe beyond what is on the current governance committee? Would you like to expand on that, Evan, just like in terms of engagement around this development of the process?
I mean, I think that if you're talking about what a rebid's gonna look like, it's gonna have to involve folks who would be engaged in that process locally, right? So I don't know what that means to develop it today, but I think that you want to have folks who are going to have skin in the game, and if a rebid process was to occur, right? Like, so I think that you'd want some representation of what it should look like to a school district. Like, what is what's the expected engagement level, I guess, is my question that I'm trying to figure out. Like, if you go through a rebid process, I assume the minimums, like if we're thinking about like minimum qualifications, I assume the minimum qualification would be like, at the very least, the governance committee or representatives thereof, and each of the sectors would have to be involved. Unless the grievances are involving the governance committee too, which probably opens up a whole other can of worms. And so I think that's kind of like, what is the root cause that the review is being triggered by? Also, I'm talking myself in a circle. What is the root cause that's here that's triggering the rebid will somewhat implicate who's involved in the rebid process, right? Because if it is members of the governance council, as an example, with like me as a hub director who are part of the core issue, well, you're not going to want those representatives of the governance council being part of the rebid process. You're going to somehow have to excuse them from that and find other sectoral representatives to take their place.
I think you're bringing up a really great point. I'm just jumping in real quick to say, because there's two levels of engagement that we're definitely going to want to talk to you about throughout this. And the first is, who do we engage with just to even develop what the process is for when we get to a responsive scenario? So who do we want to engage with to help inform what the process will be? And then there's also the question of, when we get to one of those situations, what does that actual engagement look like, and who do we engage with, and how? And so I think that's sort of like a step two that we're definitely going to want to bring to you once we've even ironed out sort of what's our process of engagement to help inform the process itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Becky, that's helpful. That's a good clarification. I mean, hub directors, yes, I think some representative backbones. It feels kind of to me similar to the group you would have pulled together for the racks to some degree, right? You'd want to have some similar level of representation who could talk about this, maybe smaller circle, but some of the same types of people.
Yeah, thanks for that, Evan. Thanks, Becky. Shira, you got your hand up.
I just wanted, and I'm not sure if this is the time for it or not, but I just wanted to just add that as we look at this process, I think that my 2 cents is that I think that we have to be very aware that often the relationship can be very delicate between the hub director and the backbone leader. And as the hub director is sometimes the subservient or the employee of the backbone leader. And so just, really with an eye and a thought about not putting, or being cautious to not put the hub director in the middle, but also to collaborate in this process.
Yeah. Appreciate that, Shira. Thank you for raising that. Yeah. So what other people to engage in this development process? What other people we've heard governance chair, the directors recognizing some sensitivity. Other thoughts?
I see Abby has some ideas in the chat.
Great. Yeah, Abby, it looks like you have a question around who initially developed the RFA when hubs initially began back in 2011. Would uh, um, my memory, and actually I may, if I may call on Lisa Harnish, my memory was that the Early Learning Council developed it. But is that, Athena, you're shaking your head, yes?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not on camera yet, guys. As I was asking the question that I posed earlier, I literally got stung on the neck by a wasp. So I'm a little bit of a hot mess right now.
Okay.
And you're correct, Heidi. The council did articulate the process. And it was an RFA process. It was broken out in 2 separate chunks, if you will. And then the RFA called for communities to self-identify the boundary, as well as the backbone entity, and then had to make all the declarations based, that were set out in the RFA. So I think that answers the question. I think that answers the question, but if there's more to it, let me know.
Thank you, Lisa. And take care.
I think a question that I have regarding is around the boundaries as well. I mean, is this, because that was the other thing that was stipulated in the RFA process, it could be no more than 16 hubs across the state. So, we could have less than, but we certainly couldn't have more than. And so when I think about a rebid process, will there be, I'll just say a mind towards changing the boundaries of the hubs in addition to the backbone entity?
I see you shaking your head, Becky. That would be a no.
So the department's intention is to keep the geographical boundaries as they are? Is
that
Yeah.
would,
Yeah.
yes.
Short answer,
yes.
yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Yep. Thanks, Lisa. Okay, and Chris, you've got a note here. Your understanding is that hubs are designed to work closely with CCOs. Would bringing them to the table make sense? I know many CCOs are part of your governance councils, and there was some learning from the CCO development in the early phases. So that could be part of that governance discussion too, and learning from their work. All right, I'd love to know from those of you in previous monitoring, which I'm referring to probably 216, 215 to 219. If you were involved in previous programmatic monitoring, let me clarify that. It was programmatic monitoring. Let me make sure I have the right questions here too. What went well, and what suggestions do you have as a new process is developed?
Heidi, I think there are only a few of us who were around during those processes a long time ago, so I'll jump in. One of the things that I liked about the previous process for monitoring was kind of the 2-step approach, where there was an appreciative site visit in 1 year, and then it was a true monitoring visit in the 2nd year. So any concerns, any potential areas of concern were brought up during that 1st year, and you were looking to see where there might be gaps, and there was time to course correct before the official monitoring visit.
Thanks for that.
If I could jump in too here really quick, because back then, the 17-19, the amount of reporting and stuff was smaller, and I think some of the problems we've had throughout different bienniums is they were adequate, asked good questions, and then they kind of continued on the same, and then they exploded with the amount of reporting work that we were asked for. I think that was 21, 22 or 22, 23. So I think just keeping in mind how much work the hubs have to do, and coming from somebody that does data pretty much for a living, and just making sure we're asking the right concise questions and not overburdening these hubs with additional things like some years have felt with. I'm not trying to be negative there, because maybe they were needed for something, but there have been some times that there were huge reports and huge monitoring stuff too that was extremely burdensome or was told to us 3 months before it was due. So I also appreciate what Christy said about the appreciation visit on like the first year of the biennium, and then maybe a monitoring visit on the second year. That seemed to go really well because there was constructive criticism and different things like that. So that's my 2 cents here while I'm taking my son to school.
Thanks, Alicia. Appreciate it. Athena?
Thanks, Alicia. I started actually right after our previous monitoring, and so I heard a lot of the feedback that came from it, and there were concerns a little bit about just making sure that what was expected and what needed to be reviewed where it was communicated well beforehand, so that there wasn't an expectation that was communicated during the review process and or things like that. And so just keeping that in mind and being really clear and concise up front and before the monitoring period even, so that we can make sure that we are mindful of what the goals are and that we're able to reach them successfully.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Athena. Jen?
I think one of the things that was really helpful in the last round was the survey that went out to all of our governance partners. I find that when we have everybody in the same room talking about our hub, they tend to default to what we do great, which is lovely. But in that survey, because it was more, I mean, it was identified by sector, but not by agency. So there was a little bit more anonymity. And I found they shared some really helpful information about where our strengths were and where our opportunities for growth were. The thing I would say though is that it was very long and there was some whining about how much time it took for them. So maybe it's pruning that down a little bit. But I thought that was a real helpful piece.
Right. That's great. Thanks, Jen. Evan?
I think I would echo some of the things that were already talked about earlier in terms of splitting the visit up was helpful, not just because it allowed us to kind of focus on some of the nuts and bolts things in a visit and prep specifically around that, but because the appreciative visit involved a lot more community engagement, and so that in and of itself is a big lift, and so doing both simultaneously could be just a lot to do well, I think would be a concern. In terms of what went well, I mean, I don't have a great recollection of the like financial monitoring. I think it was fine, kind of rote. I don't remember any red flags there. The appreciative visits, my recollection of those was it almost ended up being more for, at the time, early learning division staff than it was for us, because it was a lot of like, yes, things are going well, here's some feedback, but the feedback often was like things that weren't super operable. So it was like, well, yes, that's a problem, but we don't have a lot of agency to do anything about that. But my recollection was that ELD staff were really had a better understanding of like where investments were going, how they were being utilized, how they kind of blended in with the environment and how we were leveraging existing partnerships. And so it kind of made some of the reporting seem real. And so I think that was valuable just in kind of building insight into the hub system overall. And I think it ended up leading into some legislative and advocacy visits that were informed by those outcomes. So that's what I can share, at least from what I remember during that time period.
Right. Thanks, Evan. And Shira, just your shout out to Carla for your last fiscal audit here is noted about how amazing she was in communication and the time and support she gave you. Thanks for noting that. Did I see another hand raise? Just want to make sure I haven't missed anyone.
Since you brought up the fiscal point here really quick, I just think we need to be mindful on some of those audits and the feedback we get from the fiscal reports from the hub managers, that it matches what is in the DOJ contract. Because at times there's been feedback that came back that is counter what's in the DOJ contract. And I know last year was an older contract. They were trying to move forward to a new contract, but I think sometimes that can cause not necessarily difficulties really between Delk and the hub, but really can cause a lot of problems with the backbone when we're being asked for things that are counter to the DOJ contract, whether it's old or not.
Right. Got it. Thanks, Alicia. All right. Question that we have for you is, would you like to designate a couple people or kind of a small working group to work with us, or would you prefer to stay in full group in this conversation? And I believe that Maria was really kind and created a super short poll, so we can just, you can feel free to come off of mute. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and feel free to identify something that you prefer.
Heidi, clarifying question about the question.
Yes, you got it, Rod.
So if a small work group was developed, would they be the only ones moving forward to have input?
Great question. Some of this is still, keep in mind, this is still being designed. And I'll share with you my sort of hope would be that a small group would come together with perhaps myself, Nancy, Maria, Becky, to identify like, what are the things we need to know? What are the questions we have? Like a little bit more level of detail, and then bring it back to you all. That would be my vision. Nancy, Maria, and Becky, please feel free to weigh in. That would be my hope.
Yeah, I think that sounds right, Heidi, that if you ended up opting to sort of self-identify as a smaller group of folks to do some of this interim engagement, that we would identify sort of points of regrouping as a larger group, just to make sure that we're all sort of staying on the same page throughout the process.
In my initial thinking around even time, I had, and again, this has not been developed and we haven't discussed it, but my thought would be something around 4 hour-and-a-half meetings over the next 2 to 3 months to sort of start framing out some of the initial pieces. So that was my initial thought, but if not, we'll bring everything here.
Heidi, I want to echo Athena's response in the chat that as hub directors and with our own individual backbone organizations, you have a lot of different perspectives and viewpoints. You have some that have experienced challenges and that's new, some that have had ongoing challenges, and some who can't even imagine there being a challenge with their backbone organization. And so needing to either make sure you're getting all those diverse viewpoints as you develop this process, or that's when I took the poll, I said the whole group, just because we're all going to have very different perspectives on that.
Yeah, thanks, Christy.
Marie, is the poll still up? I don't see it anymore. So let me make sure everybody had a chance.
I think everybody had a chance because there was only a couple people left, and I counted Delk staff that would be included in that. And I can share the results. I'm hoping this will show we are
Dead tie.
Dead tie.
All right. Okay. And Rod,
Can I
go
make
ahead.
a suggestion that maybe it's a quote unquote full group, but those that feel like they can participate, or if there's multiple of us from one hub, that we designate one person so it makes it at least a little bit smaller? Because if you've never had a problem with your backbone, then this may not be something that that person could have the best use of their time doing. And if you have a more diverse experience, then you can kind of volunteer yourself up so that it could be at least a listening committee to get some ideas down, if nothing else, instead of slowing the process down to come to this whole group and wait for that.
Well, what we can perhaps strategize a little bit is perhaps kind of a mini hybrid. Like if there is but for now, we'll bring, I think the thing that we're really wanting to stress is partnership with all of you. And so, and I'm really hearing the need for the diverse perspectives. So I think there's a little bit of room for some efficiency in the processes of what's brought to you. And then if there's a need for some more deeper work, we can do another request. I don't know if that was clear. That was a lot of little, okay. Rod, you had your hand up.
I was just gonna say on one side, on your side, I totally get how smaller groups can get things done much quicker. But I will say, and I think I can credit Lisa Harnish, you've seen one hub. Because we are all very different, and I don't know. First thing I would do is volunteer to be on that group because I feel like our perspective needs to be heard. But I got a feeling everybody would probably feel that way because they want their individual perspectives to be heard.
This is helpful feedback, and I think what we can also do is regroup and sort of talk through with our timeline what also would make sense as far as how much time in subsequent monthly hub director meetings we would be able to designate towards focusing on this topic versus the time that we would want to try to get something else on the calendar with you all for outside of this meeting, so that this doesn't, take over all of our meeting time in this forum, and see sort of how that would work with the availability that folks have, because we also want to balance that with never wanting to just throw endless meetings on people's calendars, and also we know it's hard to get things coordinated, so we can just kind of continue the conversation and regroup. But Evan, do you have a thought as well?
Yeah, I'm just wondering like how much you all have already kind of thought about at least the parameters of a process, like kind of the outline of it, and whether it wouldn't help us move forward a little bit faster if we are going to do it in a bigger group setting, that DELC shares some of their initial thoughts on this, and like we could co-create that a little bit faster instead of having to start from point zero. I think, as long as you're offering it up as like a draft and there's not ego and we can rip it apart or whatever, I think it's just, to me, it's a lot easier to reflect, to know where you all are already sitting and kind of tweak than try and like start and build from scratch. So that's one thing. If we are going to have like it doing it in a larger group, having something to work off may help speed the process.
Evan, you just saved me trying to type or pull over to type while driving my son to school. I think we need a baseline from it. This is kind of like one of those things to me you're taught in school, like, don't come to me with just a problem, come to me with a partial solution type of thing. And that's something my son's learning and got in his school right now. So it made me think of that. But like, yeah, just something to work off to start with, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, I really appreciate that feedback as well. And I think it goes along the lines of what we would desire, which is to be sort of bringing things for discussion and feedback.
Great, thanks for that. Well, as we start to wind down this conversation, I just want to check in with you. What other questions or concerns are coming up for you? Yeah, Rod.
Alicia said something that triggered something in my head. As far as a starting point, I would ask Delk, grant agreements just went out. If a backbone right now said, we don't want to sign a grant agreement, we're done, what would that look like? What would that process look like? That might be a place to start.
Thanks, Rob. And Abby, I see your note here around learning from other state contracts. Good ways or pain points? Okay. Okay, other questions or concerns you might have that you want to raise here?
Heidi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I would just think that, working in the small groups, I think each hub is unique. And I just wouldn't want to be represented from someone that didn't necessarily have the same backbone dynamic that we did. I think I would like to be able to share our dynamic, similar to Rod. I'd be like, well, I want to be the first one to be on that group, and be able to share some of the positives as well as some of the concerns. But I think breaking it down into a small group, you're going to get a lot of people that don't have a say that might have some positive things to add about their backbone as well. So that would be my vote, to stay in a large group and work together on it.
Thanks, Marissa. Appreciate that. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I just want to reaffirm that, as Becky said, this is kind of the starting point. And one of the things I want to just really acknowledge and appreciate about Maria and Nancy, how I've heard you say, in our partnership with Early Learning Hubs, we like to bring what we know early, as soon as we can. And just want to really acknowledge and appreciate that in the work that you're leading. So that's why we're here. As you know, as you're hearing, there aren't all the answers. And that's part of our work together that we're going to go forward.
Heidi, I see Evan still has his hand up.
Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah.
I think Evan just took it down.
Oh, okay.
Feel free. Nancy, Maria, or Becky, did you want to jump in, Evan? Okay. Great. Abby, I see your note. You're wondering if there's room for appreciative interviews between Heidi, an individual, or small groups, and then share back with a whole group. Absolutely. Part of our engagement will include some one-on-one outreach, whether it's with you, whether it's with governance, whether it's with backbones. These are things that we're just starting to sort of put into place here. Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks, Abby. So Nancy, Maria, Becky, anything you would like to close out our time together?
I think I'd want to share that we have a mural, which is like an ideas board. Marie and I have been furiously writing everything down that we've heard in alignment with the questions that Heidi asked. So Maria just put the link in the chat. And this is a way to keep the conversation going. I know as people process and think about the questions, they can continue to add. But I think Maria's sharing her screen.
Yeah, I'm just going to share real quick. When you go in there, you should not have any issues with access. You're going to go here and then click down below where it says enter as a visitor. You can enter your name or just guest, and then go ahead. You'll have the questions here, and we've been looking to capture, as Nancy said, what you all have said, but you can go ahead and just start typing in the sticky note. If you have other ideas that start to pop up for yourself, feel free to use this, and we will continue to monitor it and capture notes from here.
Any other questions for Heidi or Becky before we move on to the next topic?
Sure. I just note you're wondering in the chat. around alignment with CCR and ours.
I don't know if they already have a process, but I know that some backbone entities have both CCR and Rs and hubs, and so having some alignment with that seems like that would be helpful.
Thanks, Shira. All right. Keep those questions and thoughts coming. And I think we'll move over to our fiscal discussion with Carla. And Carla, you're up next. Thanks for being here.
And
Hi,
Heidi,
everybody.
thank you so much for
Thank you,
joining us
Heidi.
and spending this time. And yeah, we're looking forward to continuing to flesh out the process and just to engage with you
Me
over
too.
the next several months.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Take good care.
Thank you.
Be well, Lisa.
All right. Hello, everyone. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I had a whole introduction and then realized that I think I know every single person in here. For some reason, I thought there might be someone that I don't know. But just in case you don't know who I am, my name is Carla Branson, and I am a grant management specialist here at DELC, working with the Early Learning Hub grant. I am coming in today to briefly touch base on a couple things. I wanted to kind of just give some final kind of reminders as we wrap up the 23-25 grant cycle. The most current quarter, which was the last quarter for the grant, has ended on September 30th. So those funds are eligible to be claimed. You have the funds available in AMS. If for some reason your hub doesn't have access to your awards in AMS, definitely let me know. They're labeled final quarter for clarity, so you can pretty easily tell when you hover over them which one it belongs to. So it'll say like KPI 23-25 final quarter. And then those are the ones that you would claim off of. All reports and claims are due by November 30th. When you receive your post meeting email, I will be sending a updated FAQ for the in-kind/match annual report that is also due on November 30th. It'll be really similar to the FAQ document that I created last year with just some updated information. It'll help your business offices fill that out so we can get those submitted by the 30th. And in regards to the 25-27 hub agreement, I'm not going to really touch too much on this at this meeting because we have an entire meeting later this month dedicated to the ins and outs of your new agreement, and I'll be going in depth on some changes and updates and answer all the questions that you'll have there. But I did have a couple quick things that I wanted to touch base on beforehand. First of all, your agreements are out for signatures. If you have not received your agreement, please let me know. We did catch one person with a typo in their email and then one person that was out of office for an extended period of time. So if for some reason your hub did not get your PDF, please let me know and we can make sure that we can get it to the right person. Secondly, while I won't be going into funding details at this meeting, and we can tackle any questions, especially those regarding birth through 5 at our meeting later this month when that team joins us. I did want to remind everyone that the email I sent out last month that had your funding allocations for both the current hub cycle, the one that just started October 1st, and the one for next year. The combination of those two smaller grants, which I've been calling year 1 and year 2, really only count for 21 months, where a traditional biennium is 24 months. So I just wanted to point that out because the
the grand total number on that table did seem a little bit lower than if you looked at your prior biennium. But it had a lot to do with the fact that there were 3 months less funding in the time frame, I should say. So that was just something I wanted to point out to you as well. And like I mentioned, we're going to have a meeting later this month that I'm sure you all have invites for, a great kickoff meeting. I'm really excited to share all the new things that we've done to streamline some processes and just to clarify some things to make it easier for, both you and us over here at DELC as well. And then the last thing that I have regarding your 25-27 hub agreement right now is just a quick confirmation that yes, your funds from year 1 will carry over to year 2. All of them, because we're within the biennium. So we will move anything you don't spend in that first year over to the second year, so you can use it up in the second half of your biennium as well. I'm gonna pause for a second and see if there are any questions while I try to find you on my screens, because I've been talking and I couldn't see anyone. So I've just been talking to my desktop and hoping I didn't look crazy. So any questions so far?
Rod has a question, Carla.
Okay, Rod, there we go. What's up, buddy?
Hey, Carla, this might be for you, maybe Nancy, but can we add additional people to attend the kickoff meeting if we have other people involved in our reporting and our claims? And so we can forward that invitation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, please do. Thank you. Good question.
The more the merrier.
Carla, just to clarify, you say yes, the funds from year 1 will continue to year 2. For our July through September funds, historically, if we haven't spent down all of our KPI, it gets added into the new grant cycle. Just want to clarify that that's continuing this biennium as well.
Yes, for this biennium, it will. That is when I mentioned that there was 21 out of 24 months in that allocation, that's where the other 3 months of that 24 months live, is that July through September that just happened. So yes, I will be moving those over, and that process will be automatic. We have to wait until everyone does all their claiming for this quarter. And then if there's anyone that had funds left over from the July through September quarter, I will be working on getting amendments with that corrected amount for you guys as well.
All right, thank you.
All right. Anything else so far? If not, I will keep going.
Carla, I'm sorry. I was forwarding the kickoff invitation to other staff. Did you just say that we could carry over our bridge funds into our next quarter, or no?
Yeah, you're in this situation, yeah, just like we did last biennium. So it's your coordination funds, your KPI, and your stable healthy attached. So if at the end of when we did this last biennium, it took a little bit of time to amend and collate them out, but we were able to add those. And if anyone had leftover funds, it would have shown up as I think it's called quarter 1 carryover. It was like its own separate line item when we amended around the same time as birth through 5 literacy got added last summer, or last spring, I should say, spring 24. But we would be doing something similar this time. Just to note, this will be the last time that this happens, because at the end of the 25-27 biennium, we will be officially on a standard fiscal biennium. We will be July 1st through June 30th. So there will be no more carrying over, but during this 2-year period, yes, we'll still be doing that. But looking forward 2 years from now, it'll be a little different, but don't worry, I will be there to hold everyone's hand for the entire process.
We appreciate you for sure.
Carla Renee has a question. She says, except for family support and family preservation, correct? They will not
Yes.
carry over?
Only the state dollars. So it was so like I said, KPI coordination and any money that was in stable, healthy attached that you might have left from this first quarter. Now I will put a little asterisk on that. Those stable, healthy attached will collapse back into your coordination since we no longer have stable, healthy attached as its own separate funding stream. But if anyone ends up with funds at the end, I will be walking through those individual hubs one by one. Because some hubs, about half of the hubs I think it happened last time, actually spent every penny during the bridge, and only half of them had some money that carried over. So I will be kind of reviewing those case by case and letting each individual hub know where they stand once they're done with their claiming for this quarter. All right. Anything else? If not, I'm gonna pivot.
No other questions right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So as we're close to wrapping up on the longest fiscal monitoring process, probably in the history of fiscal monitoring, I wanted to take a moment and thank each and every one of you for everything that you did to help me get this done. I know that it was a really heavy lift, and sometimes I know I got pretty annoying with my emails and follow-up questions, and no, that's not really what I wanted. Can you send it this way instead? Totally own up for, that I was being that way. But I do appreciate, the commitment that you have to the work that we're doing, both at the hubs and here at DELC. As I finish up the review, as I was finishing up reviews for each hub, you would have received a letter that had an overview of, the process, any strengths that I wanted to point out, any areas of improvement that I was able to identify for you. And as some of those were repeated across many hubs, I just wanted to share some of the most common things that I saw across multiple hubs. You guys were amazing with your communication, not just during the monitoring process, but just the entire biennium. You guys asked great questions. You reach out when you needed support. You were quick to respond to any questions that I had, both during monitoring and just in general. So I really wanted to, give you guys a shout out and say that I appreciate that so very much. And then in specific to the monitoring itself, the vast majority of the hubs had really great travel and mileage documentation. I just wanted to shout that one out as someone who worked a lot with travel and mileage in a past life. I was really happy to see that everyone was, dotting their I's and crossing their T's. And for the most part, those looked really great. And timely submissions, which you will see, I will talk about submissions in my next section as well. But I really wanted to shout out those hubs that got, and I won't call you out individually, but shout out to the hubs that got a strength recognition for their timely submission. For their reporting requirements, we looked at claims that were being submitted, expenditure reports, your narrative reports, those types of deliverables, and really appreciate that work that you guys were doing. As I pivot to areas of improvement that we saw overall, the other half of you did struggle a bit with overdue deliverables. So that is something that we are really going to be working with coming into this new biennium and this new grant cycle, really working one-on-one with hubs that might be struggling with that and figuring out where the disconnect is, working as a team, what can we do to improve that process and to make sure that we can get those reporting requirements in on a timely basis. And that's, ongoing work that we will be doing with you. Another area is certificates of insurance, and that's a weird one because I know that tends to be very much a business office function for a lot of your hubs, especially the bigger ones. But just we saw quite a bit of expired certificates of insurance that we were hunting down and not getting responses for. So that's something that we're really going to be looking at, going forward. And we'll be trying to reach out and catching them where we can. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it is, your responsibility to make sure that we have those. Suggestion that I would have is either I can tell you if you don't know, or if you have a copy of it, look at what your expiration date is for your current certificate and just put that date in your calendar for next year, maybe a month out or whatever. So you know that you have to get that in for us. And the very last thing I'm just going to very high level touch is we did notice some instances of underspending, and we will be talking to individual hubs and working on plans to figure out, what went wrong, what we can do better, what opportunities we have for engaging with different pieces of the community to make sure that we can get the funds out to community to the maximum extent possible. But it's not all about you. It kind of is a little bit about me too. So I did want to share some of the lessons that I learned during this process, because boy, was it a learning curve for me, just to be completely, honest and transparent, as I always am with you all. The workload was a heavy lift. Doing 16 monitorings at the same time was just a tiny bit more than my brain could handle at points in time, which is why I do apologize and thank you for your patience and understanding as this process dragged on a little bit longer than I wanted it to. One of the things that we learned from this is that future monitoring will not have all 16 hubs at the same time. And we have decided to not tie it down to a specific date. Going forward, as we identify hubs that need monitoring, you will definitely get plenty of heads up and know when it's coming for you. But we'll be kind of revisiting what that process looks like for this current biennium. Another issue that we all had a lot of struggles with was the file upload process. We had a couple hubs that had no problems, and you guys get gold stars, but we had the vast majority of hubs that either had issues accessing our SharePoint, couldn't get into the authenticator, either their fiscal backbone didn't allow them to do it that way, or they didn't have a work cell phone and didn't want to use their personal device to get the authenticator app. So there's a quite, multitude of things, or ones that it just wasn't working no matter how hard we tried to get it to work. It just wasn't clicking. So Delk is in the process of looking at an alternate file upload process. Most likely it will probably be like Google Workspace or Google Drive for these specific situations when we're asking for bulk uploads. To help eliminate some of the struggles that we had this time around with using the SharePoint system that didn't really work for everyone. And the last lesson that I learned was just really working on my clarification. As I was sending documents out and I sent the letters, I thought I had a really clear understanding of what I was asking. But it became obvious to me that, when 3, 4, 5 hubs were asking the same question, it was a me problem. So I noted all of those instances where, I maybe not explained something and where I thought it made sense to me, probably didn't make sense to other people. And noted those situations where going forward, I will work extra hard on making sure that I can be as clear as possible and not muddy the waters. And then the last little thing I wanted to touch base on is still going to be pretty high level because we are still reviewing some of this information, and I will hopefully have, more things to share down the road with you all. But I really appreciate you submitting all of those subgrant information subgrant, mini grants, subcontracts, whatever we want to call them, depending on the type of entity that they were. We received a lot of them in a multitude of formats. And so it's taking me a little bit of time to, take all the information and get it in a way that I can easily use. But once we have all of that information, the goal for DELC, as an agency, is to use that information to help paint a better picture in when we're reporting to the governor's office, when we're reporting to legislators, to the public in general, to each other, what the work is in the region and all the wide variety of organizations and types of services that are being offered at all the different regions. And then hopefully that might give some other hubs some aha moments for some sectors or areas that maybe Hub A is using that Hub B didn't think that was really a possibility. So as I have that information available in an easier to digest format, I will come back and share more of that as well with you, either in a meeting or, or via email. But some of the community partners that were represented in the information that we received regarding subgrants and subrecipients were obvious ones like your schools, your school districts, your ESDs, tribal nations, childcare providers and preschool programs. Some of the more interesting ones, behavioral health providers, healthcare providers, not just pediatricians. We saw a couple of other what I wouldn't have thought, but I was like, oh, that's really good. I think one of the hubs possibly had some sort of either occupational therapy or something similar that they were working with, which was really interesting. Respite programs, your relief nurseries, things like that. Public libraries were very popular, as they should be. Especially with some of the Birth Through 5 funds that you received last year, we did definitely see, an uptick in working with your community libraries, and family resource centers was another one. And a lot of those partners were doing like early literacy work and family engagement, kindergarten readiness, parent ed. A lot of technology contracts were out there for, keeping your websites up and running, or maybe having databases in your regions as well. And a lot of family support services through your Title 4B2 fund. So getting some of those basic needs met in community as well. So those were some of the, like I said, very high level. I've barely scratched the surface in looking at this information, and I'm excited to get the time where I'm not getting agreements out the door to dig into some of this data and have some time to figure some additional things out for you guys. And that's all I got. What do you have for me?
Carla, I just want to make sure that you're looking at the chat and seeing all the shout outs and kudos.
Oh, I appreciate it so much. And you guys know I'm genuinely here for you. I know sometimes I can try to be a little bit more casual about things, but no, I am 100% here for you guys as much as, I possibly can. And I think I told someone a couple weeks ago, if I can legally do it, I will try to get it done. So I'm always trying to find the best solution to situations, to the extent where, number one is keep my job. And then number two is what can I do to make it work for you guys, is kind of my flow. But yeah, I appreciate you guys so much.
Thanks, Carla. Thanks for all the good information. And I think now we can pivot over to hearing from our coordinated enrollment friends, Sydney and Mel. Thank you both for joining us, and we're looking forward to hearing your update.
Thanks, Nancy. We're really glad to be here. Hi, everybody. My name is Sydney Brown. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the new coordinated enrollment analyst here at DELC. I'm about a month and a half into my position, and I've had the pleasure of meeting with almost all of you over the past month by joining the check-ins with Maria and Nancy, and I've just so enjoyed that time just to share more about my background and get to know you and your team and what coordinated enrollment looks like in your region. So I'm joined today by my colleague Mel to talk more about coordinated enrollment. I'm going to hand it over to her to introduce herself while I get our slides queued up.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mel Hanna, and I'm Department of Early Learning and Cares Coordinated Enrollment Specialist. I am really happy to be here in this space with you and give an update with my new colleague, Sydney. As you can imagine, I am so excited to have her on board. And then I will mute myself and let you start, Sydney.
All right, just a moment. I'm just trying to, can everybody see the slides? I don't know if I'm in the right view.
I can see them, Sydney. They're just not in presenter view, so it depends on whether you want to go.
Okay, and I'm trying to find that button again. Where is that? I'm used to presenting on Teams, so I'm kind of out of my element here.
Try just going to view. Or slideshow. Yeah, slideshow. On the top.
Oh, did that do it? No? Okay.
You see slideshow on the top?
Sorry, yeah, let me start again here. Hold on.
And I can try on my end too, Sydney, if you need me to.
Okay, just a moment. Let me try this one more time. Okay, up at the top, slideshow.
And then from beginning or from current slide, either should work.
All the way to the left.
Oh, goodness. Okay, where did...
There we go.
There it goes.
It is. Great.
Okay, we're good? Okay, thanks for bearing with me through that. Appreciate it. Yeah, so as I said, I've really enjoyed being able to just start to scratch the surface on coordinated enrollment with you all in our monthly check-ins over the past month. But today, Mel and I are here to share with you an overview of DELC's coordinated enrollment redesign project. By providing some background on the project, our goals, the next steps, our timeline, and where we would love your engagement and partnership. I also want to acknowledge that I know that redesign can sound scary to some folks. Like, I understand that everybody has put a lot of work and heart into building out your approach to coordinated enrollment in your region. So I really want to underscore kind of from the beginning here that we are not starting over again by any means. What we really want to do is we want to learn from your successes and challenges and then provide more consistency, guidance, and structures at the state level to support the implementation that you're doing in your local communities. So I wanted to start off with a bit of the why of redesign and why now. So as many of you know, coordinated enrollment was initially piloted for Preschool Promise back in, I think, 2019 or 2020. And the original vision was to eventually expand coordinated enrollment to include all publicly funded early care and education programs. However, to this day, coordinated enrollment still lives solely within the Preschool Promise statute. And in the time since that original pilot, we've gotten to a place where coordinated enrollment on paper and coordinated enrollment in practice really varies widely by region, again, as I'm sure many of you know. And challenges have continued to surface related to coordination and alignment across Preschool Promise and Head Start OPK that are really contributing to a sense of competition and creating some real challenges for the kinds of relationships that are central to an effective coordinated enrollment system. So this redesign project represents a concerted effort to get us from where the system is today closer to that original and a broader vision for coordinated enrollment by creating an improved, cohesive statewide approach. So again, I'm new to DELC and to this particular project. I'm sensitive to the fact that there's a lot of important history here and that some of the issues that this project touches on are bigger than coordinated enrollment. but we really have a great opportunity now with this redesign project to take action and to focus on where improvements to coordinated enrollment can play an important role in helping to address some of those broader challenges and improve alignment and coordination across programs to the benefit of children and families and to strengthen the system as a whole. Our springboard for this work is the Coordinated Enrollment Work Group that some of you on this call participated in earlier this year. And that effort was also influenced by previous statewide initiatives like the Coordinated Enrollment Guidebook from 2021. So DELC, with the support of the BUILD initiative, convened that work group from December 2024 through June 2025, and that included representatives from DELC, from OPK Head Start, and from the early learning hubs. That work group was tasked with creating a shared vision for coordinated enrollment in Oregon, recommending priorities for statewide resources, and clarifying roles across state, regional, and community levels. And the outcome of that work group process was a coordinated enrollment report. You all should have a copy of that at this point. That was sent out along with the materials for today's meeting. And that report included recommendations around the why of coordinated enrollment, what the key functions of an enhanced system would include, and then also importantly, recommendations on next steps for DELC now that this report had been issued. So here I'll just kind of go over some high-level summary of what's included in those BUILD report recommendations. So for the why of coordinated enrollment, the report really emphasizes contributing to full enrollment across programs, supporting family choice, empowering families with information and the navigation support that they really need to be able to make informed decisions and to find the right fit for their family, and to support a thriving mixed delivery system. And I think that last part there is really important too, and I like to underscore that, you know, coordinated enrollment is really a systems building strategy. That was something that was really articulated in that original coordinated enrollment guidebook, and I think is really reflected and carried through into these BUILD report recommendations as well. The BUILD report also recommends that the coordinated enrollment system should include Preschool Promise, Baby Promise, OPK Head Start, and ERDC, and that its key functions are to include outreach and marketing across programs, eligibility screening across programs, developing and sharing data to track enrollment success, remaining capacity, and facilitate adjustments to meet community needs for all programs, and to provide a connection between the families and programs and providers for enrollment. And now I'll just add here that what I learned from my conversations with you and your staff, even just so far in this first month and a half, is that hubs have varied approaches to these functions today, right? A lot of you're doing this work, right? And each hub has varying degrees of connection to programs beyond Preschool Promise. You know, many of you are working with community partners to coordinate placements and look at slots across programs. Some have created their own cross-program screener. Some have come up with marketing approaches that really direct families to a clear one-stop shop for early care and education information and applications across programs. And many of you also pointed out key structural challenges, technology issues, and relational challenges to coordinated enrollment. It's really our job now to learn from those successes and challenges to help inform a more cohesive statewide approach to cross-program coordinated enrollment. And that's really about determining where tools, structures, and guidance from DELC will be most helpful, while allowing for that regional variation that's really at the heart of the early learning hub system design. In terms of next steps, the BUILD report created a framework for what a redesigned coordinated enrollment system could look like. And our next step now is to assess the feasibility and impact of those recommendations and to dig deeper into the details of designing solutions. So for example, with that recommendation around sharing data to track enrollment, there's a lot of really important details to unpack there, like what's implemented at the state level or the regional level. what tools are needed, what relational work or capacity building or resources are needed to ensure that those technology and data solutions are successful. So really digging in further to those elements is what this assessment period is about. And that will include a policy crosswalk to look at the recommendations against current statute, rules, and grant agreements across those 4 programs that were recommended to be included. And this is where coordinated enrollment on paper really needs to kind of play catch up to the reality on the ground and then provide more clarity to get us closer to this broader vision. And our policy team at DELC has started on this work. The other step will be a program impact assessment. That will involve working with the leads of those 4 programs that were recommended to be included, to identify what are the key considerations and potential impacts that we need to look at, knowing that each program really has its own unique goals and structures. So we need to look at these recommendations really from their perspective as well. A cost benefit and feasibility analysis, and then finally continued engagement and collaboration from external partners like yourself. So that work will take place over the next few months to inform decision-making next spring before we move into a longer period of design and implementation work. Here I can lay out a little bit more about the timeline that we are looking at. I will say this effort has been designated as an official project at DELC, which means we get some more resources for our work. We have a project manager to kind of help keep us on track. We'll also help to ensure that this work doesn't happen in a silo, both within DELC and then with our community partners as well. So as part of that work of getting ready to kick off this project, we've been developing our timeline and what our deliverables are going to look like. And in terms of that timeline that we're building out, we're really taking a phased approach to this work, and that's for a couple reasons. One is because this is a big project and this is really important work, so we want to do it thoughtfully. And the other is because we have to work around a few other key timelines. And that's primarily the grant cycle timeline and the legislative calendar. So as you know, the current grant cycle was extended through next March. And then our next opportunity to get back on the regular biennial schedule is in July 2027. That's also our next opportunity for potential statutory change, which will be needed to address again that element that coordinated enrollment in statute really still just lives solely within preschool promise statute. So the legislative calendar is something that we're keeping in mind with this effort as well. So the first phase of redesign will include implementing some initial elements of the build recommendation in this next grant cycle this coming spring, while we then spend more time doing the planning, engagement and design and policy work that we need for a bigger shift in phase 2 with that 2027 to 29 grant cycle. The other related body of work that is part of this project is the work around strengthening coordinated enrollment oversight and accountability. So I will hand it over to Mel here on our next slide to talk a little bit more about that piece of the work.
Thank you, Sydney. That was a lot of information. So as part of the coordinated enrollment redesign and pulling in components from the Secretary of State investigation, our goal, and we're aiming to strengthen accountability and oversight. The coordinated enrollment grant deliverables will be updated, like Sydney just mentioned on the earlier slide, and that will also include more robust reporting. This will also help guide improvements to where we need improvements to training and technical assistance. Alongside this body of work, we will be clarifying roles and responsibilities across the Department of Early Learning and Care teams. Our goal is to clearly define the duties and the handover timelines of the different areas of Department of Early Learning and Care. Next slide, please, Sydney. We certainly cannot do this work in a silo. As you know, this slide displays the different DELC teams that we will be engaging with throughout the redesign project. Our first conversations will be around the program impact analysis and the clarifications of the roles and responsibilities and defining what those are internally at DELC. And then I'll give that back to you, Sydney.
Thanks, Mel. The other important piece of the puzzle as we're working on developing our communication and engagement plan for this redesign project is, of course, our work with our community partners and all of the sort of interest holders that are external to our work here at DELC, but are essential to the success of this project. And we really want to work in partnership on designing these solutions so that they are effective. So this is kind of a really high level list of the folks that we've identified so far in terms of external partners. I would really encourage everyone to reach out to me if you have any suggestions about other partners that could be engaged. I know you really are the experts in your local community and as in terms of the network of folks that you work with for coordinated enrollment and your broader hub roles in your area. So if you have any suggestions, please share those with myself or Mel. We'd love to hear that. We'd also welcome any feedback about this presentation. Right now, we're in a phase with the project where we're taking this on a bit of a roadshow. We're trying to ensure that we're giving consistent information to all the different groups of folks that are involved in or will be impacted by this work. So please, again, feel free to reach out later if there's elements that weren't clear or you think would be beneficial to add to this presentation. We'd really also appreciate that. And then I also wanted to talk with you while we're all together as a group about next steps for engagement. I know that I learned a lot in our initial meetings that we have. I still have a couple hubs left with that I'll be meeting with this month. But I really would love the opportunity to dig deeper and work with your staff as part of our process of assessing the build recommendations. So that input can really help to inform really a lot of those details of the how elements of the redesign. So when I've met with you, a lot of folks have pointed me towards your coordinated enrollment staff who have really been identified as the experts in the work, the ones that are really in the weeds of these details. And so my thought on next steps is that I would love to have an opportunity in November to bring all of the coordinated enrollment staff together to dig a little bit deeper on some of the opportunities and challenges that were highlighted through our initial discussions. But I wanted to open this question up to the group. Would hub directors like to be a part of those calls, that meeting as well? And if so, I'll take that into consideration when trying to schedule that. The other piece that I wanted to float is that knowing that we want to do this engagement in November, we're also thinking about how we can start to build out an ongoing space to talk about coordinated enrollment. I know that there were various opportunities in the past. There were office hours, there were the cohorts, there were sort of different versions. Right now we have the Preschool Promise focused monthly hub meeting, and then we have this hub meeting. And it feels like now is an opportune time to maybe create this third space when we can really start to talk about this broader vision of coordinated enrollment and all of those pieces that go beyond the specifics of Preschool Promise placement and that all of the details that go into that, because I know that work really deserves its own meeting as well. So I would just open it up to the group right now. How do you feel about me engaging with your coordinated enrollment staff, either through one particular work session and then this broader question about sort of the readiness and interest around having a standing monthly meeting for coordinated enrollment so that we could continue to get input from you as we're working on this redesign and so that we can continue to be sharing updates about any upcoming changes.
Sydney, I'm looking at the chat and I'm seeing a couple of comments, one from Athena. When looking at scheduling, November's a bit tricky, trying to squeeze all the meetings in with several closures some of us have. And then I'm hearing from Rod and Shira to include coordinated enrollment staff, that's a good idea.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Evan, see the hand.
I'm gonna lower my hand because I don't want to get on it to not lower this time. Yeah, I think having the CE staff is at the table is absolutely crucial, especially when you're talking about like trying to dive into the more of the technical nuance and some of the problems and opportunities. But I wanted to clarify, is the question around like the conversation about the broader implementation meeting the true vision of coordinated enrollment? Are you saying that's where you want to have a specific conversation with the coordinated enrollment staff, or that's a conversation you want to have a space for hub directors and coordinated enrollment staff? That's what I'm trying to tease out, because I
Yeah.
think our coordinated enrollment manager would have opinions on that, but his positionality is not necessarily the one would be charged with like the broader strategic vision of what universal coordinated enrollment might look like in the community per se, right? Like he has a specific role in implementing the grant as written today, as opposed necessarily to the broader purview down the line, where like me or Nancy would be the people who should be involved in that.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Evan. I think that's exactly the piece that I'm trying to tease out here and wanted some input on, because I think that's the balance of, I know your coordinated enrollment staff really has that technical expertise, and they're the ones day to day that are able to identify the challenges that they're seeing and have ideas about solutions or have developed solutions already. So they have that view, which is really important. But then I also want to engage hub directors on that broader vision. And then also, of course, on when it comes to any sort of decision making as well. So I think if we were to have a space just over the next few months that was a standing meeting to get input about the redesign, which in my view includes some of those detailed technical challenges and the broader vision, and to provide updates, I could approach it as inviting both the staff and the directors. But I'm not sure if that helps clarify your point, but I think that is some of the nuance that I'm trying to tease out here.
Yeah, no, it's helpful. I think it just means that what it sounds like having a more of an open space for more involvement, and then people can self-select based on agendas or where the directionality of the conversation as it moves forward. So, okay. Yeah,
That's right. That's a good point, Evan.
follow
Yeah.
on it.
Yeah. Thank you.
I wanted to go back to the chat, Sydney, and then just note that
Yeah. Please.
Evan noted school districts for partners to engage as well. And then
Okay.
below put EIECSC has been a huge valuable partner in all 3 counties' networks.
Great.
And then we had agreement from Renee for engaging CE staff. Marissa included, please include Blue Mountain Early Learning Hub as well. Abby has a chat saying, I supervise my CE staff, so I'd like to be included, but definitely include them. I know not all hubs operate the same way. We have Shira who has a request. While we are chatting about CE staff, I would love to know or see other hub staffing matrix for coordinated enrollment. This may not be the place for this, but just putting this out there. And then we have Evan, maybe COSA would be easier than specific school districts. Not 100% sure on how to navigate that.
And Evan, I'll just start with the last one and kind of go backwards there. The COSA stands for.
That's the school district administrators
Oh, okay.
organization.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And then Shira, also, I agree that's something that I've been curious about too. I know that hubs all have different ways of approaching using the coordinated enrollment funding, especially when it comes to staff structures. And I've heard of some really innovative ways of kind of approaching, making sure that there's enough staff in the right area, especially for hubs that have multi-county communities where each one is very different, and just all of the solutions that hubs have found around staffing. So I'd love to see that at some point as well. And that's also a good example of something that we could dive into if we had a space that was specific to this kind of work of coordinated enrollment that is broader than preschool promise enrollment in particular. Okay, I'm seeing another comment from Abby. Some districts are preschool promise providers, so they might be covered that way. That's a great point as well. Possibly small school associations. Any other thoughts or questions right now, just about any, it could be about other elements of the presentation or really specific to how we think about structuring this engagement to make sure that we have the right communication pathways established to get input from everybody and to keep everybody up to date, especially leading up to this sort of first phase of work, which will be the next grant cycle in April. Okay, I'm not hearing anything so far. Oh, we've got another in the chat. Coordinated enrollment staff can definitely provide good input and probably help bring up areas of improvement they have noticed but haven't had the opportunity to bring up. Yes, that is a great point. I have had the chance in some cases, coordinated enrollment staff were able to join our director calls, or I was able to have a follow-up meeting, and I did find that very helpful. It really brings an additional lens to the conversation.
And Sydney Shira writes, ultimately, I think we would want to engage families in the process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that was another piece, as I was meeting with all of the hub directors this month, I did ask about your parent leadership councils and whether those were in place, because I'm really trying to identify, are there sort of existing groups out there where there are parents and caregivers in the community who are sort of already positioned to provide feedback and are already sort of leaders in their community that we could engage at various points throughout this redesign project, because I think that is absolutely essential.
I'm seeing that Krissa wrote, Sydney, our hub is really looking forward to the work that you are doing around this. And then Rod asks, will there be any rules or encouragement for Head Starts to participate? We don't have a problem, but I know some areas do.
Is absolutely, Rod. I think when we look at this build report recommendation about the 4 programs that need to be included, and that being Preschool Promise, Head Start OPK, Baby Promise, and ERDC, I think really where we need to start and focus the most energy, I think initially, is on that connection between Preschool Promise and Head Start, and looking at sort of what can we do to provide more structure or supports or tools for that collaboration between hubs and Head Start programs. That's another area where I've seen varies a lot by region, and people have found a lot of their own methods that seem to be working, but what more can we do to support and encourage that? So I am working on engaging the Head Start directors that were also a part of the build report. We did the same presentation to the Oregon Head Start Association last week. And then the Head Start directors that participated in that build work group are kind of our go-to folks that we'll work with directly to get input on the redesign. And then they'll help us to engage the larger group of Head Start directors or provide updates to that group as needed. So Rod, that's definitely a big area of opportunity when it comes to the redesign work. Any other thoughts from folks on that point? Okay, I'm seeing a comment from Abby. We're working on a survey for the parents we've placed via the coordinated enrollment process, and we'd be happy to include specific questions if you'd like us to. Do others survey their families? Could that be a mechanism for collecting parent input? Our FLC is such a small fraction coalition of the willing, a survey might get broader response. Yeah, that's a great point, Abby. I think there's always a balance between deeper engagement with a small group of folks, right, or really casting a wider net to ensure that we have good representation of all the diverse situations and needs that folks have. So I think those are both excellent ideas. Does anybody else want to add on Abby's point there, or anybody else regularly providing surveys to families?
We have the option to and have done so at different times, but and those can be sent out at any point in time that our governance council or it's decided that they need to be.
Thanks, Alicia. That's great to know. I think I'll definitely add that to our list as another opportunity to engage parent feedback throughout this process. See, Athena also added, we have surveyed in the past, especially when we have had the survey evaluating coordinated enrollment within the hubs.
Yeah,
We
I can
also
speak for.
engaged
Oh,
with
sorry, Athena.
with PRE, and I just totally Pacific Research and Evaluation, and had them do some surveys and listening sessions with our parents. So I know Prairie has worked with a lot of different hubs, so they would be a great resource for some historical knowledge and survey results and things like that as well.
And I was
Well,
just
thanks,
gonna.
Athena. That's a great point. Sorry, Alicia, go ahead.
I was going to follow in on what Athena said, but kind of expand what I said just a second ago. So Northwest, Washington, and South Central all are running the same system that has a very capable way of surveying through the system to parents and capturing percentages and requests and sending re-requests. So if there was something to be done, that gives a good chunk right there.
Thanks, Alicia. And to say that again, that was through your ESD? Did I hear that right?
Yeah, that's through the coordinated enrollment software system that we use.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's South Central, Washington, and Northwest.
Alicia, this is Becky. Which, just for 1 second to go off on a tangent, which program do those 3 regions use? Or hubs?
It's the Electronic Information and Designs Engine platform
Okay.
through the Douglas ESD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe through my conversations, I heard there's at least 2 or 3 hubs, maybe more, that have a software system that was like designed for them by their ESD. Seen some head nodding. Yeah. Yeah, that's another thing that we're looking at too, is trying to get a sense of the different software systems and where there's opportunity for streamlining there as well.
Sydney, a couple of other comments about surveys. Evan says we can do surveys. Efficacy depends on content. And then Jen at Yam Hill said survey participation usually requires some kind of incentive to get much participation.
That's right. That's a good point.
I know we need to wrap this up, but it sounds like there's some good appetite for having a space to talk about, and clearly a lot of topics for conversation around coordinated enrollment, with a desire for there to be a shared space that would include directors and coordinated enrollment staff. So that's really helpful feedback, and as well as everything else folks have already cast some light on today. So thank you, Sydney, so much for joining us and keeping this ball rolling too.
Yeah, thank you all for having me, and Mel, and for the conversations that we've had so far. I'm really looking forward to continuing to work with you on this. I'm going to plop my email in the chat just in case anybody doesn't have it, and please feel free to reach out anytime. And then in the meantime, stay tuned for more updates on what this engagement structure will look like. Thanks.
Thank you, Sydney.
Nancy, you're on mute.
Thanks, Maria. Chris, I see your comment in the chat, and we can be sure and get that to Sydney and Mel. It looks like there's Sydney's email right there. You could send that to her, or we can. And with that, we've just got a couple of minutes left, and we thought it would be a good idea to just wrap up the meeting by sharing just a brief summary of the results of the peer learning survey that we sent out last month. It probably seems like a long time ago. But we had just almost all of you complete the survey. and I'll just run down the questions and the general summary of the responses. As far as timing, it still works. The timing after, I don't know, 3 years is still the best for everyone. So that was great to hear. And that's every other month on the odd number months from 9 to 10:30. And we asked about the content of the sessions. We wanted to know if you wanted to have just the meeting stay focused on KPI, or if you wanted to open up the meeting to all of the funding streams. And just like with the poll earlier in this meeting, it was a tie. 6 selected all funding streams, and then 6 of you selected keeping the space focused on KPI and then opening up another meeting for other funding streams. So, and 3 of you were neutral. So Marie and I huddled on that, and based on our current capacity, we really don't have the ability to add monthly peer learning sessions right now. That might be the case further down the road. So we thought it would be great to just try out opening up our peer learning sessions to all of the funding streams. And just to continue the peer learning and all of those robust conversations we had on KPI, continue that with system coordination and Title IV-B. So the way we're going to roll that out is to dedicate the November peer learning session on figuring out how to organize the content. We'll have a sign-up sheet. We're going to ask that every hub present at least once during the biennium. So we're really excited about supporting you in whatever way you need to brainstorm about topics, to potentially align it with kind of the new approach with our quarterly reports. So there's just a lot of thinking, a lot of ways that we can share what everybody is doing, what the questions are, challenges, successes. So I think it'll be interesting, and we'll focus on that. I believe it'll be November 5th is our next peer learning session. So with that, I think we've wrapped up a really amazing meeting, so much information passing forth between everybody. I just want to thank you all for being here. Thanks to our presenters. And I think we'll close out asking you all to complete the exit survey so we can always improve these meetings. We read every single submission and really appreciate your input. Thank you all, and we're looking forward to seeing you at one of the kickoff meetings, October 20th or 23rd. Just a quick reminder that these are the same meetings, just 2 options. So just select the one that works best for you. We're looking forward to seeing you there. Thanks, everybody.